All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the post-show show. I'm just gonna call it the post-show show. Do we have a better name?
We need something that starts with an F. That flyover alliteration thing. We were calling it the wine down earlier, just because, but we don't have any
Yeah.
wine. Like the wine, I need wine for that. But it's more of like with this new format, we're kind of trying to pack as much as we can into that first 45 because that's kind of the meat of the show, so to speak. And so I think the way we're going to start doing this more is any other topics that aren't pertinent to City directly or the game day, especially because on the radio it's airing right before the match, may get moved to the second half. But also, if there's anything deeper we want to go into on topics that we kind of touched on earlier, I think we did a pretty good job on this one. But
Yeah.
also, we have some questions that were asked. I think we can get to some of them we touched on, but I think we can do that as well. So, if there's anything, Phil, you wanted to talk about on deeper into Charlotte, if you want to have another 15-minute conversation about our back passes,
There is something I want to talk about with Charlotte, but let's do the listener questions. We really did fit everything I really wanted to talk about for the first time ever. I couldn't believe we got so much into that show. So we did.
Don't act like it's not stressful for the second one. Trying to,
know.
I'm not going to let you put on a brave face because I'm not.
I
don't have a brave face.
No, I was being terrible before this game. I was like so many jitters. I didn't have a chance to study like I wanted to. I was so scared. But once we get going, it's always so natural because of you guys. I'm able to. Anytime I don't have anything to say, all I got to do is say a name. You guys take off. But I don't remember.
I got him if you want him. Yeah, I got him if you want him. So let's see. Jacob Ellis asks, a lot of chatter in MLS forums of St. Louis being gifted goals. Is it a direct result of the high press, luck, bad execution by our opponents, maybe a bit of both? Anything else you want to? We did cover that one. We made sure to talk about that one on the KTRS part. But I personally don't think it's luck. I think it is bad execution though by our opponents. There's no doubt about that. They either aren't. You could see Kippy in that first match not pay attention to where he was passing the ball. He was looking around. He was looking at the keeper, the other center backs. You saw Milando kind of not even pay attention to where Klaus was. He was solely focused on the keeper. I don't even think he saw it at the corner of his eye, Klaus. So definitely bad execution, but you can't discount how well St. Louis has been in forcing that kind of pressure. If it wasn't for Nelson in the first game and Ostrak in the second game, there would never even be a reason to go back and even look for that back pass.
What just occurred to me, like just now, I can't believe no one has said this yet. The West has never had to play an all-out high press team. The West. I mean, not regularly. So like they may cross and play Red Bull or Philadelphia every once in a while. And there are some, like LA and Vancouver, I think, are two of the higher pressing teams.
Stole the words out of my mouth. That is exactly what I was going to say.
But we're pretty extreme. I mean, the chaos is our comfort zone, So, like, I don't know if I think that we're also a novelty in the Western Conference is actually helping us too. But, just to say, again, I know I did the devil's advocate last time, but like, I'm going to do it again. Like, do we see this much after week 8 or 10? And I don't know. That's the main thing. Do we see it much after guys figure out how to be soccer players again?
So here's the thing though. If we don't see that kind of a back pass, what do the opponents do? So in either of those situations, whether it was Milando or Keller, what would they have done differently? What should they have done differently? Because they were being pressed back into essentially their corner of the defense. Do they clear the ball like out of play on the side? Yeah. Do they try to, switch? Do they try to switch to the other side? What is the right play given the scenario of you have one of our forwards and one of our wingers so deep by the keeper that we're essentially blocking off the keeper, and you have pressure being put on by another midfielder to push the ball back. So you're definitely right. I can't see this persisting, but I also don't think bad things are going to happen as a result. You can only get better from that, whether you force a switch. Mm-hmm. You're playing transition defense potentially at that point. So that could be something to watch out for if they try to switch the ball. If they just play the ball out, then it's a turnover, and we forced a turnover, which is just another good thing.
Yeah, and I do think we're going to keep forcing it. But, I think they'll have to be turned on. They'll have to be less casual. I think is going to be the main fix, just like not being casual, because both of them were a way too over casual. But, that happens in Europe. That happens in every league of the world. So
it does.
I'm not saying it is going to go away, but I do think it's going to be harder to come by either way. But if this is happening toward the end of the season, if this happens in the playoffs, I mean, come on, like we're going to be so happy. I love it.
That would be truly amazing.
But it is possible because I do believe that it is our system causing these troubles, not pure dumb luck. It's just not. I'm sorry.
Totally agree with you there. Another question from Joe might be a question for later, but what is the home stadium situation for City 2 now? Going forward, what's the policy? Here's the interesting one. Around City players playing for City 2 and vice versa. So we talked about the stadium. We talked about the stadium a little bit. So we're speculating, and Santi had anonymous sources with the sales team. I really like that one. That said that City Park is clearly on the field, and that's backed by precedent from last year with other teams. But the policy for City players playing for City 2 is as loosey-goosey as it comes. So we touched on it that if you don't see a player make the game day lineup, the game day 20, but is rostered for City, you're probably going to see him for City 2. It's almost like an unlimited short-term loan scenario where any player rostered for City 2 City can play for City 2 in that next game. You're only likely practically going to see it if there's a need. If they don't see minutes for City, they're going to play for City 2. Vice versa, though, is where you get tricky. So MLS has their roster rules, and I'm talking about MLS, the first team. They have their roster rules, they have the requirements, they have their roster slots. City 2 doesn't. City 2 has a very much more open way to sign players. There's not a salary cap. Probably don't need one at that level, but there's a lot of other very loose guidelines for how to sign players. Now, when you go from a player signed directly to City 2, and I'm going to use Juan Kuzain as the example, because Kuz is signed to City 2. He was announced very early on, still has a City 2 contract. Because he's signed to City 2, he would have to be signed officially to City and fill a roster slot on the City roster if he were to move up. Same thing with Ezra Armstrong, Dita Armstrong, all those guys signed directly to City 2 contracts. Now, that's where you're probably not going to see anything unless something's officially announced. If Ezra Armstrong is signed to a City contract later this year, he could bounce back and forth. But otherwise, anybody that is signed specifically to a City 2 contract, not going to play for City.
Yeah. Those roster spots, and that's kind of what we were touching on earlier. Those roster spots are they're precious. That's the word I was looking for.
Yep.
So you don't just give them away. And to be honest, like I would say this is the part of the Bartlett signing that was a little bit confusing. Matt, you said it in your video. I was glad you mentioned it because this is our fifth center back. I don't remember
what I said. Okay.
On the roster.
Yeah.
And if you include Nilsson, who was put on injury reserve, basically,
6.
That's 6. Yeah. I mean, 6 center backs on one team's roster. That's a lot.
And, especially when we've talked about our lack of depth at some other positions, especially the midfield position.
Exactly my thoughts. Yes, exactly that. And I just wonder what that means. Does that mean we're not incredibly confident in any of our center backs? Does it mean we need a lot of center back depth because defensive play is extremely important to a team in their first year, which is something that I kind of sit on. I'm not sure it's either, to be honest. I don't know what they're thinking.
The weird thing, though, and it's only a very small sample size, only 2 games. So this is something to pay attention to in the next few games. We talked on the KTRS part about the number of players playing the full 90, how it's our back line, it's Leuven, it's our defenders. So the place where we have significant depth at center back, we're not leveraging any of that depth. It's been Hebert and Parker at center back. Yarrow has come in moments where we needed to kind of park the bus. But if we're going to continue to give our starters those significant minutes, then that 2 or 3 layers of depth isn't going to be needed. But you look at the vice versa. So you look at our attacking players, significant rotation every single match so far, every single being 2. Yes. But you're talking about the players who are sprinting for the 60, 70, 80 minutes that they're playing. Every single one of our attackers have been subbed off at some point in these first 2 games. So we don't have as significant depth there. So match day rotation, as far as who makes the 20-man roster, could be interesting. I'm looking at guys like Isak Jensen, who hasn't played yet because he's been injured. He hasn't seen time. I'm looking at Azeel Jackson, who can play that attacking mid. He hasn't seen time yet. Sam Adeniran finally got in against Charlotte.
That's cool.
some of the players, there's 2 deep in certain positions. Forward position has 3 deep, but it's not like 6 total players for 2 positions. So I'm just interested to see how that goes as far as, are we heavily backloaded on our back line where we don't necessarily need that for the MLS season? Maybe those guys only see Open Cup time. But
Hmm.
our attackers, as far as their stamina going forward with I don't want to say limited depth, but there does seem to be a difference in the level of depth between our back line and some of our attacking positions.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about Leagues Cup, which was announced today. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Mhm.
And Open Cup, we need
Yeah.
guys to fill in those roles, and I'm sure that we're going to do full swaps in those situations as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as the center backs, and probably goalkeeper too.
Yep.
But I just wonder if we'll get surprised one of these days. Maybe we'll have five-man back lines or 3 center backs. That'd be cool to see. And also, like, do we game plan for having a tall guy at the center back position if we think we can steal one on a set piece? That'd be like, are we going to play Bartlett merely
Yeah.
because he could score a goal on a set piece this week?
I
It's
mean, those
possible.
those teams we play where we know it's going to be chippy and we know that they're going to try to push us, like an LAFC or Vancouver, where they're going to try to run the pace of play, and we could end up giving up corners. We could end up giving up fouls in dangerous positions, and we need that. That could be a conscious tactical decision that gets made.
Yeah,
And this
absolutely.
this team in with City 2 at least did run a 3 center back lineup a few
Hmm.
times. So there is that. We saw the 4-2-3-1 in Austin. We saw the 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2 against Charlotte. We can run a 3-man back line as well, using our fullbacks as true wingers in that midfield.
And to be honest, like, if Blom gets hurt or if he needs to rest or if he can't play, um, I'd be interested to see if that's when we use 3 center backs, because that would
Yeah.
kind of make sense to kind of have an extra man back in the counterattack. But it leaves you open in other ways. So it's give and take, of course, in every scenario.
And you never know how things are going to change depth and substitution wise when Max Schneider finally. Uh, i- if
Woo.
I should say if though, because Miggy Perez, good lord, he's been showing up and showing out. So Schneider could find a lot of time with City too in the scenarios that we just got done talking about. So you're looking at like a Vasilev or Perez in those roles there. Um, I don't know. There's one other question that we had, and it kind of gets to this exact conversation along with one thing we touched on. Another Joe. Is it the same Joe? Yeah, same Joe.
Mhm.
Any anticipated changes to prep, formation, lineup with artificial turf surface in Portland? So I think we talked about the
Hmm.
lineup quite a bit, but do you think any of our formation or lineup choices will be predicated on that artificial turf surface?
No, in fact, I think the way we play actually, in some ways, may be better on turf. It translates better rather from grass to turf, in my opinion, because it isn't predicated on pretty passes every single, like, passing isn't the thing we're trying to focus on every week. Our passing accuracy, our possession, what I mean, these are stats we almost throw in the trash every week. So I think it translates well for us, and I don't think it'll be a big change. And it was interesting. The only relatable thing that happened in the press conference today was someone asked Stroud, like, are you worried about this? Are there going to be any changes? And Stroud was like, we're all American. Any American at this age has played on, turf as much or more than grass. So it's like
Yep.
no big deal. So that was kind of cool to hear him say.
Yeah, and the way we play, I think it does lend itself to turf. You're spot on that. We don't make little quick chippy passes, just trying to wear the defense out. We make long passes if it's on the ground, and so if we're not sending the ball in the air looking for a man, we're stretching the field with our passes, and I don't see a whole lot of difference in those regards with turf. But I do really enjoy the fact that, and we talked about it earlier, Leuven and Vasilev are spending time working on their set pieces and their corners from turf that we have.
Mm.
So that will set us up well and help in the transition to knowing that surface where we haven't had that so far this year.
Yeah, Vasilev lefty, Leuven right. So
Yep.
the two main guys. I'm curious if Pedro gets in on that, because I think clearly he's probably got a good leg for it.
I was speculating. I wanted to put him in my starting 11 that we were talking earlier, but I don't know. I talked myself out of it reading the stats of Nelson has just played the
Hmm.
full 90 with these other 4. And so I don't know. We're on a winning streak. How much do you really want to mess with that for that core group of players. I'm talking our back six,
Yeah.
Leuven involved too, because they're just being so successful in their 1v1s. They're so successful in cutting off the attack. And I just don't want to mess with that. I don't want to see that mess with too much going into Portland. Now, if we lose against Portland and somebody's exposed or God forbid an injury occurs, sure, yeah, we'll have a very
Yeah.
different conversation next week.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go too long before eventually the coach's hand is forced in some form or fashion, right? So far, it's pretty awesome that nothing crazy's happened. That's really nice, and that's a good thing. But at some point, we're gonna, it's time will show,
Yeah.
whether someone needs a sub or not.
And the worst
pretty
that's
easy.
happened so far, if I recall, is Indy Vassilev broke his nose
Right.
and
It's easy.
Klaus's body cramped up all over after his Austin goal. Joachini, I think the injury he picked up to his back was after the match, I want to say.
Mhm.
I don't think he actually picked up the knock during Charlotte. But yeah, crossing these fingers on that this injury bug can stay away for just a little bit longer. I do think maybe it's the Joachini injury that has been talked about, missing a couple days of practice. I definitely don't see him starting against Portland
Mm.
for that, and just I think it's going to be a midfield battle more than anything. And I like the presence of Indy Vassilev in that central midfield, which could offer Leuven some opportunity to play more of that 8 position and help blow him on the defense against Evander.
I really like Vasilev as a sub, and that's not something that's going to happen every time. And I can't wait to see him as a full 90 starter at some point,
Yeah.
because I might change my mind. But boy, as a sub, you could tell those fresh legs and the change in the press and the change in the passing. It was really cool to see that sometimes offense is the best defense. And not that he's a bad defender. I thought he did great, but he does add more to the attack when he comes in for sure.
I caught myself looking back at the expansion draft the other day and thinking just how well that worked for us.
Dude, I think that all the time too.
Remember how we had talked about, this is hit or miss. It's very spotty. Some teams, players just 3 or 4 might not play. You might just trade most of them for GAM. And here we're sitting with Nico Joachini having started a match and been incredibly crucial to a lot of our goals and our pressing. Indy Vassilev, same thing, started a match already, and he was that super sub here against Charlotte. And then John Nelson, goodness, up 280 minutes in 2 matches. John Bell recovering from an injury, and then Tim Parker. I count him as an expansion draft because he is. Jake
Yeah.
LaCava, see you later. Tim Parker, welcome on.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a haul for what we've been able to do these first 2 matches.
It is, and I was tempering expectations hard because everyone who picks expansion draft players, they don't really use them. Not really.
No.
And we've gotten, didn't we get? It doesn't matter. People don't use them. We've used them to very good effect, and I've loved to see that. And they've been a mainstay of our rosters, so that's really cool. We found value in like a weird MLS thing.
We did. So before we get into Open Cup, Leagues Cup, anything you want to talk about for the Charlotte match that we haven't touched on? Your experiences. I know you hung out with Manuel Veth for a little bit.
Oh, that's true. Oh my gosh. There's actually a lot to talk about. Let's talk about quickly the tactics because it is a quick one. It's not that big, but you look at the possession and the ebb and flow of the game. I love those charts that show who possessed the ball in what minutes and who's half and stuff. That's really helpful because when I rewatched it really it showed exactly who you felt was in control of the match for the most part. And I think you got to hand it to. We caught Charlotte at a good time. I think a lot of people said that on the broadcast too, and they're right. I mean, they're not clicking yet, but they do have really good pieces, and I think the coach is still figuring out where to put those pieces. They've got too many in certain places, and I think we benefited a little bit from them making the wrong choices. I think there were a couple guys in the wrong spots. It sounds like you feel the same way.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. They're, on paper, you see there are 3 designated players that Charlotte had, but in practice, they don't play well together. It doesn't seem like Jozwiak, it doesn't seem like Swiderski really like playing out on the wings. Swiderski is very much a number 10, that second striker underneath, and they just don't seem like they're comfortable playing where they're being asked to play. And I don't
Mhm.
think either were incredibly dangerous. Swiderski did have that
Agree.
cross from the right side, but that's he didn't do anything with the ball when he was given the opportunity. So I definitely see this club similar to last year, where they have the ability, if they put it all together, put some players in positions that they enjoy playing and that they're successful in, to do what they did last year, start off very weak and then eventually pick it up and put it together to make a playoff push. But totally agree that it's probably the right time to hit them. Hoping like it's the right time we hit Portland.
Yeah, and I don't think necessarily that we couldn't beat them when they're at their best, but because I think we were very effective in what we did. I think the
Yeah.
XG shows that even with the giveaways. Like I think we
Oh
really
yeah.
did look like a good team and the better team on the night. But if you look at, I thought they like we talked about how perfect that goal was from Capetti. Any team's gonna beat you in that way, in that regard, if you set it up for them in that way. So like that's fine. That's going to happen throughout the season. And we responded, but we didn't respond until after Charlotte had this like 20-minute phase where I thought it was kind of their best like 20 minutes of the game, where they looked like what you think Charlotte wants to look like. They possessed the ball, they unlocked us in a lot of different ways, and they just weren't able to kind of finish it off the way that they wanted to or should have even. But that was one thing I wanted to bring up, was like those 20 minutes they looked very good. And there were moments where we looked a little suspect in defense. And I think Parker like takes chances. That dude took so many
Yeah.
chances. Like he would take 3 steps further forward than I thought he should, and he would get a block with his head. And
His
so,
head,
and they
he
were,
used his head so many times to clear the ball.
yeah,
That's what something that I'm just doesn't inspire confidence to see that used a lot. It's good that he knows how to do that and can pull it out as a repertoire, but that speaks to me the transition defense that we have. That's just, it seems a little dicey at times, and we're, maybe it really speaks to the fact that we need to keep these players playing together that are used and comfortable to each other, and that they
sorry,
know
Matt.
where each.
I got to pause this. I think I got a house emergency. So I need to go
Oh,
downstairs. We'll pause and we'll continue in a minute.
okay. Definitely no way I'm going to get back into that thought.